What is happening, guys? Cowboy here, and welcome to my leveling build for Sorcerer in Diablo 4. Now, we've tried a lot of different Sorcerer builds on stream recently: pure fire focus, pure ice focus, pure lightning focus, and this is a culmination of all those builds, pulling from the best things out of each of them to pull something together that has great vulnerability application, great crowd control, great burst, and most importantly, great swappability, because nothing is more frustrating than dying and running back when you're trying to level. So, either way, let's jump into it. I do want to note that this build is very independent of legendaries. So there's certain legendaries that can help it. Stuff like ice shards are going to pierce. Stuff like standing still will deal more damage. But for the most part, you can get by with almost no legendaries. Most of the legendaries I have right now are very utility based. Stuff like gain a barrier when an elite hits you, or restore mana upon using a cooldown. So it's stuff that helps for sure, but it's not stuff that I would consider to be linchpins of the build. Either way, let's jump into the first thing I want to talk about are our abilities. Now, to start, for our basic ability, we're going to be working with Spark. Now, the main reason for this is Spark grants us a 2% stacking increased critical strike chance for up to 5 seconds. This does maintain as long as we do one cast of Spark every 5 seconds. So, in a sense, this is just an 8% critical strike chance buff, which is pretty nice, especially early on when you probably don't have a lot of sources of critical strike. Keep in mind, you do need to cast this once every 5 seconds to maintain that buff. Moving on from there, we have Ice Shards. Now this is going to be our primary damage dealer. For the most part, this is going to auto go off anytime we end up having an enemy that's frozen, because we're going to have this in one of our enchantment slots, but even then, it's going to be our primary damage dealer. This spell is going to do immense amounts of damage to anything that we focus fire with. It's also going to constantly apply vulnerability, making it great whether you're in a solo or a group setting. Moving on from there, we are also going to have Blizzard. And Blizzard is just to give us another really strong opportunity to help chill and apply the freeze effect to enemies. I tried out a couple different skills here, and this is really more of a flex slot. So if there's a different skill you prefer to have, you could certainly put it in place of Blizzard. But I think the big thing that sold me on this ability is when I was fighting bosses, I noticed that the continual chill buildup from Blizzard was actually helping to build the stagger bar up quite significantly. Because of that, I settled on Blizzard being the final skill for this build.
I need time to do that.
Moving on from there, we have Teleport, of course. I think a staple of pretty much any build in Diablo should be an ability that has Unstoppable. You always want to have something with Unstoppable, because there's nothing worse than getting stunned and then seeing a massive attack comes in that wipes you out, when all you had to do was just get out of the way. So whether it's going to be Teleport, Fire Shield, Ice Shield with the legendary augment that makes it unstoppable, the point is you absolutely want to have something with Unstoppable. And in this case, I think Teleport is a long-term tradition when it comes to playing Sorc. It is very strong, and in this case we also get 30% damage reduction after casting it, just making it a great inclusion into pretty much any build. Moving on from there, we are running an ultimate with Deep Freeze. A lot of the Sorc ultimates are really good. This is by far my favorite. We become completely immune to all damage for 4 seconds, deal a ton of damage to enemies during that duration, apply chill to enemies during that duration, and then do a burst of damage. And most of the time we end up freezing enemies as well when we do this. So very, very, very strong skill. I mean, we're looking at chill application, potential freeze application, damage immunity, gives us an opportunity to heal. I absolutely love this skill. And on top of that, if we spec all the way into it, it's going to reduce all of our cooldowns by half when we use it, making it great because this is a very cooldown focused build. And then last but not least, we have Frost Nova. Now, Frost Nova is typically a CC or defensive skill. In this case, it's going to be one of our primary damage dealers. Keep in mind that I mentioned anytime an enemy becomes frozen, we're going to be firing off ice shards at them. Frost Nova is a guaranteed freeze. So essentially the way this works is we run up, we hit Frost Nova, and our ice shards fly out in a AoE shotgun, just absolutely melting whatever we decided to hit with it. All in all, it makes Frost Nova probably one of our primary damage dealers, although the actual damage that's being dealt is through the enchantment with ice shards. Looking at our enchantments, we're going to be running ice shards, as I already mentioned. This is just great because Frost Nova is going to be freezing enemies, Deep Freeze is going to be freezing enemies, Blizzard is going to be freezing enemies, and all of these just gives us more chance to fire off free ice shards. And then we're going to be running Fireball enchantment. Now this is just going to be adding a little bit of direct damage into all of our skills, but more importantly, this is going to synergize once we get a little bit later, close to level 30 and beyond, where we can pick up passives that will allow us to heal off of any enemies that are burning. And we'll talk about that when we get into the build itself in just a little bit here. Now to talk a little bit about the ideal rotation for this build, typically you'd want to open up by casting Spark 4 times to get up your critical strike buff, and then obviously maintaining that. But most of the time, honestly, you're just going to walk around and either hit Frost Nova or Deep Freeze, and everything that's around you is going to die. Keep in mind that because these abilities are AoE, they're going to apply the burn effect to everything that you're fighting, and then because of that, you're going to have constant healing also coming in, so your survivability is pretty much just persistent. It's just going to keep going off as you continue to play. Besides trying to keep up Spark, obviously anytime you're up against a enemy that's going to require some nuke, that is going to be where your Ice Shards come in. Typically what I like to do is cast the Blizzard while I'm at max mana right on top of the elite, and then I'm going to just focus fire with Ice Shards until I completely bottom out on mana, and then I'll usually teleport Nova, and then because I have the one where cooldown stuff is going to restore some mana, that will boost me back up to where I can continue spamming Ice Shards. But for the most part, this build is very much kind of like situational based on what you should use and when. It's a very straightforward build to play, and I think pretty much anybody's going to be able to just pick this up and run with it. Now to talk about the skill tree, of course we're going to be picking up Spark, Enhanced Spark, and Glinting Spark. You are going to need 1 point in Firebolt, but I wouldn't worry about this until you're at level 30 and unlock your second enchantment slot. Moving down to our core skills, 5 points in Ice Shards, Enhanced Ice Shards, and the Destructive Ice Shards. Moving on to the defensive tree, Teleport, Enhanced Teleport, Shimmering Teleport, and then we're going to be picking up Frost Nova, Enhanced Frost Nova, and Mystical Frost Nova. Over in the Conjuration tree, we're going to be picking up Precision Magic, giving us a 15% lucky hit chance. Going on over into Mastery, Blizzard, Enhanced Blizzard, and Mage's Blizzard. And then lastly in our Ultimate tree, Deep Freeze, along with Prime and Supreme, Permafrost, Hoarfrost, Icy Touch, Frigid Breeze, and then Fiery Surge, 1 point in Endless Pyre, and 3 points in Warmth. Lastly, we pick up Avalanche because having the double damage on our Ice Shards is going to be more valuable than the chance to deal damage to enemies after they explode from the freeze. So to talk about some alternative choices and why we didn't pick them, right here, we're not going to need Crackling Energy, so having Crit Chance is the obvious choice. We get some AoE application from Greater Ice Shards, but to be honest, AoE is already taken care of from both our Ice Nova as well as our Deep Freeze, causing Ice Shards to shoot at all enemies. Moving over here, similar to before, we don't really need Crackling Energy, whereas damage reduction is always going to be valuable. Over here, we could get some mana generation from Frost Nova, but to be honest, you're not going to be running out of mana in large enemy situations. It's usually going to be against bosses, and we already have other means of mana generation, whereas having 6 seconds of vulnerability is always going to be valuable against bosses. This is obviously going to be a no-brainer, because as you've already seen, we have a lot of different things that are banking on lucky hit chance. Looking over at Blizzard, basically I think the extra duration that I'm getting here is going to be more valuable than the 3 mana per cast of Ice Shards that I save. Basically 3 mana per cast, that I have to cast like 7 to offset the extra 4 seconds that I would get out of a regular Blizzard cast. So that's what we went with Mage's Blizzard. And then over here, obviously, we're just going to be filling up everything. Now, as for moving forward from here, obviously you want to flesh out all of these passives. I do think having 2 extra points in Fiery Surge could be worthwhile if you're finding yourself struggling with mana regeneration, but having 3 points in Frigid Breeze might just offset that. It's one of those things I just need more time to test with. Obviously, filling on out Blizzard is going to be useful. And then besides that, another passive that has some potential here is Elemental Attunement, just giving us Lucky Hit along with our critical strikes to potentially completely reset Frost Nova, just allowing us more shotgun blasts. And that's going to wrap things up for this build. Like I said, very, very straightforward build, has a lot of burst potential, a lot of damage potential, and it's just a lot of fun to play. You know, running around and being like freeze, and then everything is just boom, 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 and getting blown away. It's super, super satisfying. So either way, thanks for coming on by and checking it on out. Hopefully you guys try out the build and have fun with it, and I'll see you out there on the battlefield.